Hello, everyone. Welcome to SoulPrism Podcast, where we share bite-sized nuggets of wisdom for your body, mind, and soul to serve you, the emerging soulpreneur. My name is Tammy Mack, and I am so freaking excited, you guys. I get to interview my mentor. Like, how amazing is that? Dr. Karen Curry Parker is a pioneering human design educator and the founder of Quantum Human Design. With a rich background spanning over 3 decades as a human design teacher, TEDx speaker, and best-selling author, Karen is dedicated to unlocking individual potential through their innovative approach of quantum human design. With her unique blend of scientific acumen and spiritual wisdom, Karen has dedicated her life to helping others rewrite their stories and realign with their true wealth. Welcome, Karen, to SoulPrism Podcast.
I'm so excited to be here. And I don't know, like mentor is weird to me in our relationship because I feel like I watch you and I learn so much. So thank you for being one of my projector teachers. I appreciate you so much.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I don't know if you remember, but I was actually on your podcast back in 2020, and you did ask me the question, what was the difference between a coach and a mentor? And the way that feels correct to me, it feels right to me, is a coach teaches you something very linear, very stair-step process, very, this is my niche, this is what I coach you on. Where a mentor is more expanded, it's more open, it's more whatever drops in the moment is what we're working on. And so I've been with you since 2019, and you have had such an amazing glow up, I have to say, since 2019 and 2020, when you first went from traditional human design to introducing quantum human design and the quantum alignment system to now this beautiful business and empire and mission that you've created that supports so many people.
Thank you. Thank you.
And you've written so many books. I remember the very first book that I bought of yours was Understanding Human Design. And it was the traditional human design. It was very grounded and very easy to understand. And since then, you have written multiple books. I would love to hear. Pardon me?
I'm not done yet.
And you're not done yet. You're not done yet. So I'm curious, like, where did quantum human design come from?
So it's a really long story, and I'll do my best to try to give everybody the shorthand version, because the bottom line is, as you may know, I worked for and studied with Ra Uru Hu, the founder of traditional human design in the early 2000s. And I came into human design kind of serendipitously, accidentally, cosmically, on purpose, and worked in this environment, studied traditional human design. But as I brought with me into that environment my therapeutic background. I'm a nurse by training. I was trained as a life coach. I'm an energy psychology practitioner. I've done energy healing. I was a midwife. I have this very kind of traditional healer background. And when I started working for traditional human design, I certainly was totally in love with it, could really see the benefits of it. And while I worked with Ra, one of the things that he always said was that someday he would write what he called the Awakened Ravi Ching. So he wrote a book. Really, he didn't write, because he didn't write. Everything he wrote is actually a transcript of him talking. But he has a book that was basically, he calls the Ravi Ching, which is basically a breakdown of all the parts of traditional human design. And he always said that traditional design as it is right now is not complete. It's designed to be spoken to the not self, or our conditioned self, or our inauthentic self, that part of ourselves that's internalized, familial and societal and even ancestral expectations. So in about 2005, my sacral, I'm a manifesting generator, my sacral just stopped responding to going to work. I still went to work because I had to give my 2-week notice, but I couldn't, something about the way the organization was shifting. Jovian just had started at that time. And my sacral was just, it's time for me to go off and explore my own understanding of human design. And I started, at that point, I was doing a lot of readings. And it was interesting for me because, first of all, most of my readings were with projectors. I think I only did 2 generator readings in 5 years. It was all projectors. And I have a very beautiful fractal. I think I have the best fractal in the world. And part of my fractal is I just kept getting readings with people who had already done a lot of work. They'd done the deep dive, shadow work, therapy, meditation, all the things that we talk about. And they were repeatedly saying to me, I really like human design. There's something about it that I can feel and sense is valuable, but I really don't relate to it. Especially I don't relate to the language, and I don't relate to the not selfish. And people would say to me, 10 years ago, for sure, I would have been there, but I'm not there anymore. And that really got my attention. And I filed it away and then started working on the Understanding Human Design book, the red book. And in all the weirdness of how the world works, like just a week before the book came out, Ra died. And that was a very jarring, shocking, true to Ra, right? Shocking up to the end. Shocking way to go. And the timing was really shocking. And around that time after he passed, I kept hearing his voice in my head. Someday I'm going to write the Awakened Ravi Ching, but he never got a chance to. And I sat with that for a couple of years. It was like, what are we going to do now? That source of information is gone. What are we going to do? And it finally occurred to me that I could write it and that I needed to write it, because if the system itself was incomplete, what it wasn't offering people was what's next after we heal. Because to me, traditional human design is prescriptive, right? It's the path that we follow to reconnect to the physical, visceral manifestation of truth in the body, right? Every strategy and all the authorities are really about how does this feel in your body, and getting us back in touch with trusting that visceral, physical, somatic response to what feels right for me and what doesn't. When we practice living in that place, after a while, we get back to our baseline of who we are. But that's not where we stop. And our tendency, and I actually think this is a little bit of a risk with human design, is that if we don't understand that human design is a system that's based in archetypes, and archetypes aren't static, they're dynamic, and you can experience the whole spectrum of archetypes. And when we start saying, I am a this or I am a that, and we start using it as a labeling system, we forget that it's actually not, human design is not a what, it's a how. And that when you live true to yourself and you get comfortable going back into that how, and you live from that baseline, the story of how you make decisions starts to change. And that whole idea of strategy and authority, and this is dangerous for me to say, so I'm going to be really I'm putting a big asterisk on this for all of your listeners. Don't skip this step. You have to get back into your body. If you're like, oh yeah, I know it, I've got this, no problem, and you leapfrog over this, and then you try to go to where I'm talking now, your life will reveal to you very quickly that, hey, you're not quite ready for that yet. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with you if you have to heal that piece first. Let's really normalize the idea that healing isn't brokenness. It's just realignment. We're holding, not healing, right? But eventually, so here's part two. Part two of what happened is a lot of my clients were saying, I understand how it feels in my body. I get downloads. And I know, when I get a download, I trust it. And I know that it's right for me. And I know I'm supposed to follow it. And if I don't follow it, I'm actually oftentimes miserable. And human design tells me you can't follow downloads because that's from the mind. And if you follow a download, then you run the risk of making a false decision, right? Or a bad decision. What I found is that when our clients, and certainly this is true in my own experience, when we decondition and we move back into that space of trusting the body and trusting our body's response, then we can start to trust our response to everything, including the thoughts we have. You start to get, if you follow strategy and authority for a certain period of time, and I'm not going to say 7 years because the scientific facts around the 7-year thing is not correct. That you do not replace all of your cells in 7 years. In fact, your brain cells and your heart cells, there are many brain and heart cells, which is really where our identity is stored. There are a lot of them that don't duplicate themselves ever. You get what you get. So sometimes you're just stuck with what you got, but you can optimize it. But it started, when you decondition, you can really tell when you get a download versus this is my monkey mind going, hey, I should do this and I should do that. There's a whole different frequency and quality to it. And when we discount that, we basically say, okay, I'm this passive person and life acts upon me, which I think, especially when we talk about projectors, is a shadow mythology in traditional human design. It's pretty disempowering in a lot of ways and leaves us being at the mercy of a cosmic force that we have no influence over. And we're just basically hapless victims of the unfolding of the cosmos. That just never jived with me. That never resonated with me. That is not how I feel and sense and know the world in any way. And to a certain degree, it also allows us, if we really follow those thought forms all the way through, to abdicate responsibility over our choices. And I have a big problem with that. I don't want conditioned hurting people. And let's be really clear, usually it's hurting people who are reacting based on old protective dynamics from their trauma out there recklessly making decisions, saying, I have no choice. That's not the healthiest place for us all to be. So anyway, bottom line is, around that time I said, okay, we need something more. We need to go beyond just healing and getting ourselves back to baseline. We need to explore what's the next piece. What was that missing piece that Ra never got to finish? So I actually took a giant thesaurus, Rodale's thesaurus, which is like this thick, into a sound lab. I took all the vocabulary of traditional human design and started really testing words and the frequency of words, and rewrote the language of traditional human design to create the language of quantum human design. And that language really embodies a certain a really specific frequency of energy. And it's a way of talking about ourselves in such a way that we structure or build a field of information on the quantum level that gives us room to grow into a bigger version of our story, a more expanded expression of our story. And it shifted, what I found. So I did that piece, but I also sat in meditation for a long time. And I really thought about and reviewed like a lot of what my clients had been telling me for now at that point more than 10 years. And I'll give you an example. A lot of my projectors would say to me, I can't even count how many times projectors said to me, I feel the whole planet lurching. I go to bed at night and I feel like I traveled to Korea and I'm working on the grid. And that was like a thing that so many projectors were saying to me. And I was like, they can't all be saying this and not have some kind of validity to this, right? That they're tuned in and dialed into something in a very different way than I am as a generator type. And when I started to really go back and review, like, what are they doing? What are each of the energetic types really doing? And how do we like give vocabulary to that bigger thing that a lot of times they feel and sense and know, but when we start to put words to it, they're like, yes, I feel seen. That part of myself that it's not necessarily always a secret part of yourself, but it's a part of yourself that like you're here on a bigger mission than just managing and guiding people, right? You're also at night, you're holding the whole energetic grid together. And we haven't talked about that. We don't talk about that. But yet when I say to all my projectors, hey, you know what you guys are doing at night? Like, or like when you think you're just laying on the couch watching Netflix, you're actually like anchoring the grid of the future in place. I can't tell you a single projector that has gone, nope, I'm not doing that. They're all like, yes, that's what I'm doing. Whether you're doing it literally for the whole globe or whether you're doing it for your community, or even I have a daughter who's a projector. She's 16. When she was a younger kid, when she was little and like still went on the playground and stuff, she would come home and she would say things. So I'm going down several rabbit holes today and you're not even asking me questions. I'm just talking. So thank you. She went to school very close to where George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis. And when she went to school after that event, she couldn't be in the schoolyard. She would go out in the schoolyard and she'd say, Mommy, I just had to go lean up against a tree. And I would just stand at this tree at lunchtime and just try to clean the playground. I would just try to make the energy in the playground better. And I think that's what the projectors are doing. And that's why they're so flippin' tired, right? Especially when they don't understand, like, you're not just working like a generator, that's one thing, but you're also holding the entire planet together energetically. Can we talk about that? Can we address that and put language to that? So that's the other part of what I did with quantum human design is I looked at how do we evolve the language, but also how do we evolve the purpose of all the parts of the chart, including the purpose of the types and the profiles and the centers, and how do the centers work in terms of, tapping into your innate creative power and your co-creative capacity with source, and what are the themes that you're working with through the gates and the channels and the circuitry, and how does that relate to human evolution? So took me probably, I know you said 2019. I don't remember when I actually officially made red carpet official quantum human design, but I certainly was playing with it quite extensively by 2015, 2016, and adding it into some of the programs that I taught and trotting it out and seeing like, how are people going to respond to this? So I did, I'm not a third line, but I play one on Zoom, I think. And it definitely took a lot of very careful exploration about how to put it all together. That was the short answer, Tammy. So.
No, I love it. And for many people, they don't know the story behind quantum human design. And I feel that it's really important. Back in 2018 is when I first found, or human design found me. It was through a different coach, and she was doing a life purpose lab or something like that, and how to create your business with your human design. And while I was listening to her, it just felt so dry. It just felt so in the head. Like I couldn't figure out. That's exactly it. I couldn't figure it out. The language that she was using, being a projector, all of the things. It was like very much in the head. And then so I went online and I started searching for other teachers who were talking about this. And that was you, Karen, back in 2018. And I started certifying with you in 2019. So that was the bridge. I took the traditional human design with you and the quantum human design with you at the same time. So that's where I'm saying, for me, I was introduced in 2019. And there's so many gems that I want to touch on with what you were saying. Let's talk about language. Language is so very important. And I'm a channel myself, so I really understand how channeling works. And channeling works, no one is a clean vessel. No one is a clean vessel. We all share through our conditioning, through the way that the energy moves through us. So the way that it moved through Ra was like Radio Shack. That's how I picture it. It's very 1980s Radio Shack. Everything has a purpose. It's all very mechanical, and like I can literally see him plugging in how to plug in a TV, all the different cords to plug in a TV to make it work. That's how I see the way that he brought in quantum human design. But during the 1987 harmonic convergence, that he says that he downloaded this, there was a lot of different spiritual teachers who came up with something very similar but different in new ways. Access consciousness, body talk, Carolyn Miss's sacred contracts, Joe Dispenza, even with the way that he talks about interfacing with the quantum, right? Obviously, I'm a projector and I see the tapestry, I see the threads and how it's all working together. So I love all the emergence of channeled content, that the same kind of download came through so many different voices. And so I'm like a way of, you can't say that there's a purity to a system, because we all download it in so many different ways, and the way that we teach it, the way that we move through it, the way that we use it in our lives is going to be impactful, but it all is the same stream of consciousness. You've written so many books, and there's a couple of books I want to talk about today. I hope that's okay. The first book I want to talk about is something that you said that you channeled yourself, and this was Inside the Body of God.
And I will say I channeled, but I was pregnant with my projector at the time, and I keep thinking, I think she wrote it, and I was just like writing out for her while she was still in utero. So in so many ways, that book isn't really mine. There are parts of it that are mine, and certainly there was a lot of vulnerability in it, but I also feel like it was definitely directed by the projector in my womb.
I want to hear about your relationship to Thomas, that your spirit guide, either at that time, I don't know if he's still your main guy right now, but how it moved through you. Like you said, you were pregnant with a projector, and obviously she was in there, and she was also sharing energy and space and awareness with you. But I would love to hear about the process, the download, the inspiration, the way that the book moved through you, and how that you shared that book, because it was very impactful for me.
I thank you for that. I'll start at the very beginning. I had what was called an imaginary friend when I was younger, whose name was Thomas, who rode around in the backseat of my mom's car while she was smoking in the 60s. And he talked to me my whole childhood. He talked to me, and he would tell me things like, your job is to go forth and teach only love. That's your job. And that was I had a very mystical, very magical childhood, just in my head mostly. And certainly at that point in time in my life as a young child, I was a medium, a natural medium, which was terrifying without having a human being, another human adult medium to mentor me. At that point, there was a lot of confusion, which I find a lot with kids who are natural mediums, just a lot of confusion about what was happening. And when I was maybe 5, we lived very close to a railroad track, and 2 young teenagers were hit by a train and killed. And they came to me, their spirits came to me when I was in my room. And they were like shocked. That happens sometimes when you pass really suddenly, and they were shocked, like they didn't know what to do. And it terrified me at that point. And I started to scream, and I was hysterical. And my father came in. My father never hit me. It was the only time my father hit me. And I think he just didn't know what to do. And so he smacked me in the face, because I think that's what you learn to do in those days. If you're hysterical, smack her out of it. And I remember very consciously saying, I'm not ever going to do that again. And so a lot of my spiritual gifts, including my relationship with Thomas, went away. And went away for I don't know, probably till I gave birth to my 3rd child, who is sort of a master wizard himself. And I gave birth to this boy. I guess I was 28, 29. And he was very different, just a very different kid. And we had this extensive relationship. I thought he was extraordinarily verbal. Like the conversations we had between him and this little kid, me and this little kid, were mind blowing. And somewhere around the time when he was about 18 months old, maybe 2 years old, and it's all blurry now because I'm 60, but somebody said to me, he's not speaking. Are you worried about that? And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? Like, I'm having these amazing conversations with this kid. And then finally realized, oh my God, these are happening in my mind. Like, he's literally not talking with his mouth. And he actually didn't speak until he was 4 years old. He was diagnosed with an auditory processing disorder. I feel like now these days that he has a 1222 in human design. And so he really wasn't going to talk unless he was in the mood, really. And when he did actually talk, he talked in a full sentence from the start. He said, "Hey, I'd like some pie, please." And that was his first sentence. But that experience with him, it was interesting to watch him, because when he was little, like, he would stand in front of doors, like glass doors, and he would shake his fists. Like, you could almost, he's not a fifth line, but I'm projecting, because at that time I was even going, okay, he's not talking, but I think he is. That's weird. And he was so frustrated. He was so frustrated all the time. And I could tell, like, there's some part of him that was remembering, like, being able to move the door like this without having to actually open it. Like, he just was frustrated. Being human was really hard for him. And for whatever reason, sort of his emergence into my life brought Thomas back. And at that point, I was like, okay, I have an imaginary relationship with my kid that's not talking. I guess I can have an imaginary relationship with my imaginary friend at this point. At that point in time, my marriage was really in a difficult place. I was really lonely. I was trying to navigate what to do. My first husband had type 2 bipolar disorder and was very dysregulated. And there was just so much chaos happening in our lives at that point. And it just all came back. And it really was a highlight of deep mystical relationship with this guide that has changed over time. And it's interesting that you bring it up, because I feel like in a lot of ways, since I was in graduate school, I got way back up in my head, which is easy for me to do. I have a split between my ajna and my throat center, and they're both, my ajna and my head are defined. So I can pull myself up into my house, into the tree house of my brain, and live up there very easily. But I have definitely been feeling like it's time to listen a little bit better, because things are shifting.
Absolutely, they are. I really, once again, I love listening to you talk because just being able to see the patterns of what you were saying. Like you were saying your ex-husband at the time had bipolar, your son was not speaking or auditory. And I just see these two frequencies coming together to bring in your relationship back to Thomas. Like it's just, I don't know, just the way that I see it, just like it coming through. And I really did love Inside the Body of God for so many reasons. Once, it introduced me to the gospel. So thank you very much, Karen, for introducing me to the Gnostic, the Gnostic, because we could go down a huge hole, down the rabbit hole with the Gnostic. But that was what was one of the first things that opened me up to the Gnostic. And I just finished reading a book called Quantum Spirituality. I don't know if you've read that book, but it's all about the Gnostic texts, Christianity, and quantum physics all wrapped into one understanding.
Sounds good.
I have a relationship with Sophia, and it really grounded some of the information that was still soupy in my brain and made me understand the Sophia and the Gnostic in a very quantum mechanical way. So grounded it down in that way. But anyway, very good book. Go read it. So the second book that just blew my mind that you wrote was and you'll have to remind, the Quantum Human, I believe it was, the Quantum Human. And this was all about the 2027 mutation. And I have to say, I am one of the lucky ones, you guys, that was so fortunate to listen to Karen's talks back in 2011 and listen to the progression of what she was saying back in 2011 in her teletalks up to the point of where she wrote Quantum Human, and how a lot of the things that she was talking about back in 2011, but you're talking about collectives, you were talking about hive minds, you were talking about all those things that we are seeing play out now. And I did study a lot of Ra's material of the 2027 and heard the doom and the gloom and all the one side that he saw, which is 100% absolutely like it is a possibility. We are seeing parts of what he was talking about come to pass. But the beautiful things and the ideas that you were talking about as well are the things that I want to be a part of, that I want to bring into the world. So I would love to hear a little bit about the process of that book. And how are you feeling about the 2027 mutation that's coming?
So, first of all, I would say you said it first. Everybody is a channel. Anybody who channels, your receiver is going to influence how you interpret the information that you receive. And I personally believe that we're supposed to wrestle with channels. We're not supposed to be like, oh, so-and-so said that, because that becomes a cult and that's not. The purpose of a channel, really, if you go back and you look at Old Testament, and prophets are jerks. They're all jerks, right? They're supposed to be, because we're not supposed to take them at face value. We're supposed to grapple and wrestle with what they say. So I love that we have to wrestle with what Ross says all of the time. And I hope people wrestle with what I say. I don't want people to take what I say at face value, because that is not the purpose of human design. The purpose of human design is to find your own inner authority, not to follow somebody else. And I think, I was told by Thomas, go forth and teach only love. And living in a compound with a machine gun doesn't feel like love to me. And that's how some of that information is interpreted. I also feel like it is a little bit misinterpreted. And I will go as far as to say, I think even Ra misinterpreted some of it. And when we go back and we look at the last time we went through a big mutation, which was in 1781, that mutation happened at the end of the scientific revolution and incorporated concepts from the scientific revolution. And if we look at art and science, often shift before consciousness shifts. If we go back to the late 1800s, when we had a big change in science, right? We had quantum physics showed up. All these guys studying these quantum particles, suddenly they were like, wow, these quantum particles that make up the physical world, they don't actually act like they do in the physical world. So we got a dilemma here, right? And at the same time, we saw the advent in art, the beginning of modernism, and people who were distorting reality with their painting. That to me says, oh, okay, actually the 2027 mutation started about 120 years ago. And the consciousness around it began to shift a little bit after that. So if you go to the 1920s and you start to look at the New Thought movement and even Napoleon Hill, I think, right? Napoleon Hill wasn't really that mystical. Think and Grow Rich is not really that mystical in a lot of ways. He was just titling a book in alignment with the consciousness shifts that were starting to happen in the 1920s. We've been in a deep curriculum for the last 120 years about just literally exploring if the quantum world and the material world are so different in how they behave, something's off. We got to figure out what's off. And if actually the material world behaves like the quantum world, then we need to rethink how we process and create on the physical level, on the material level. And I think that's a big part of what the 2027 mutation is actually about. And I don't think in February of 2027, boom, we're all going to make a shift and we're going to be like new people. Mutation takes time. It's taken almost 400 years for us to integrate this last mutation. I think we're already deep in it, and I don't think it's going to suddenly shift. Do we have the potential for things to get really awful? Yeah. I look at the world right now and I'm holding my breath. And part of it is because I think we have some old patterning and old programming we've got to rewrite. And to a certain degree, because of that old programming, sometimes we don't get inspired to write and change things until it hurts, right? And then we're like, oh, yeah, we should probably rethink this. And I also think, even though it looks doom and gloom right now, or it can, depending on your lens, the old systems have to come apart. They do. They're not serving the higher good anymore. And even though it might look like, oh, we're heading in this really terrible backwards direction, conservatism is a part of evolution. 2 steps forward and 1 step back, which is what conservatism is still 1 step forward. And I think if we look at it in this very micro lens of today, it looks horrible, right? But if you take a big step back and go, okay, but over the last 200, 300 years, we've made huge progress. We're having a little bit of a disruption here, but this disruption it's the symptom of systems falling apart. And what I think the solar plexus mutation material teaches us, if we look at the high potential of the archetypes that are being highlighted in this change, is that when it's falling apart, we can't afford to abdicate our creative power. And to me, in traditional human design, there's the doctrine of no choice, where we say, you have no choice. You are who you are. You get what you get. That's what Ra would say. And I actually believe that we have no choice when we're conditioned. When we're conditioned, we're reacting. We're acting out the same pattern again and again. And if we go back and we think about in the energy that really that's about to shift out in the cross of planning, there's a channel that's defined through the cross of planning, the 4037. That is where we hold all of our agreements, including our ancestral agreements. You be the victim, I be the victimizer. Okay, this time around, I'm gonna be the victim and you be the victimizer, right? All those agreements are held in that channel. And I feel like part of what's happening is we are renegotiating all of those agreements. We're getting rid of them. They don't define who we are anymore. And it's hard, right? If you've been used to being the one in charge and you like, I was the one in charge, and now you're having to dismantle that model and you don't know what to replace that model with, it's terrifying. That's why we have the patriarchy is terrified right now, because if the patriarchy gets disassembled, which it will inevitably, then who are we without that model? And we are really being called, I think, during this particularly poignant and intense period in this shift, to make a decision about who are we going to choose to become instead. And to a certain degree, it's a wide open field of possibility. And I think that also scares us when we don't know how to trust our own inner authority, which is why human design is so important. Because if we know ourselves and we understand that we're unique and vital and irreplaceable parts of the cosmic plan, and we each have a unique role to play, and we are essential, and our job is to connect with that role, and we get that, then we have to trust that if we take up that right place, right space, and everybody else does the same, that the tapestry will evolve as easily as possible. But if we don't know who we are, and we don't know how to know where to go and what to do, which is most of us, that unknown looks terrifying. And of course, we're going to try to go back to how things used to be, because that we understand that, right? There is a certain, I think, fear of the unknown happening now that could potentially kick us into the shadow piece. I also just want to add one other piece. Sometimes when we channel, it's metaphorical, it's not literal. And I certainly think if we start looking about like tribes, Ra talked a lot about tribes during the 2027 mutation. We'd all be living in compounds as tribes. And I think really we are doing that already online, right? We have our little communities and our tribes, and we're polarized. And does it mean that we're literally shooting each other? I hope not. I hope not. We are so much better than that. Does it mean that we don't need to be mindful of where we live and how we use our resources and how we sustain ourselves? We'll have to. I think we have to now. You, at the very least, part of your resource is your energy. We have to guard our energy so that we don't open up CNN or whatever news you might look at in Canada and get scared or despairing, because if we do that, then that old energy is winning, right? If we can look at that and say, oh, look at what the collective story matrix is doing this really funky, silly thing right now. And I'm not going to participate in it. I'm not going to buy into the scarcity, the fear, the othering each other, the polarization. I'm going to stand right here and I'm going to hold this space of what's next? What else can we build? How do I need to be? Who do I need to be to build the world I want my grandchildren to live in? And that, got my thumbs up. That's the dictate right now for those of us who know, right? That we cannot allow ourselves to get swept up into the chaos. We have to be actively practicing. We have to be practicing staying calm in the center of the storm, and not just staying calm, but also asking ourselves, okay, what do we want? What do we really want here? Do we really want to win? Winning isn't working. So how can we do this differently? How can we all win so that we don't have winners and losers anymore? Because that's the old stuff, right? That's the old polarization. How do we structure it so that we all win? And I think that's coming. I think it's very much coming. You live in a similar world as me. In my online community, and my students, and my people I meet when I speak and when I teach, those are the people who are going to be building a world where there's no losing, because we all want that heart-based world. And there's enough people, I think, anymore in my world. I very rarely encounter someone who isn't coming from that place.
I love that so much. What I wrote about the 2027 mutation, and I'm just going to bring this just in really quick, that there's 3 types on the planet right now. There's the stabilizers, and the stabilizers are holding the foundation. They're holding the old. They're gripping, right? Playing a sacred role. I'm grateful for the stabilizers, because if we didn't have them, we'd have complete chaos and we wouldn't be able to create. Then we have the anchors. I'm an anchor. I'm anchoring in the new energy. I don't know what to do with it. That's not my job. But I know that I'm holding space. I'm holding the vibration of what's to come. And then we have the builders who are building the new, right? The new infrastructures, the new business. And they're taking in what we're guiding, what we're sharing, and we're building. Okay. And one more thing, we're going to move into the energy now, because one of the things that I follow is the Kali Yuga. And many people say that we are moving out of the Kali Yuga into the age of energy. And so I want to talk about your newest book, Quantum Wellness, because as we move into the age of energy, it's all about your thoughts and your beliefs create your reality, your story. And so I would love for you to take the next 5 minutes and talk about your newest book, your newest baby, Quantum Wellness, that I read, and I also have an audio, just saying.
So I love about human design is it gives us such a good entree into looking at our story. We know that the stories we tell, or the beliefs that we have, or the expectations that we have, if we want to go back to looking at it through the lens of quantum physics, right? If a quantum physicist has an expectation about how a quantum particle is going to behave, generally speaking, it fulfills that expectation, which makes measuring things on a quantum level really complicated because you're always going to influence the data, which, by the way, happens with all science anyway, but we don't always talk about that either. But because all science is a manifestation of quantum. Anyway, so if we think about expectation and we look at the idea of expectation through the lens of how we're creating or experiencing our world, expectation is really just a story, right? We have a story. We tell a story about who we are and how we are. And because the brain is such a refined and highly efficient organ, when we have that story, whatever it might be, it programs the brain to see the world through the lens of that story. And I'm using story as the word very intentionally because when we start talking about thoughts and beliefs and feelings, and we say, my thoughts create my reality, it gets so complicated for us, right? We try to logic it and we try to get over here on the left side of the brain and really think and rationalize our way through these things. And really, there's a part of us that's so beautifully and exquisitely designed to transform through story. In fact, when we look at this from your background in your training and therapy, like when we look at how do children learn, including the values of society on the laps of people reading them stories or telling them stories. We have, as humans, a long history of storytelling as a way of bonding and exploring the narrative that is the human journey. And so when I look at stories and the stories we tell and how the stories we tell about things like money and our relationship energy and our bodies, how when we tell those stories, they show up in all these pieces and parts of our lives of, okay, I need to change my story. It's hard to know, like, where do you start? Like, where do you start? And so what I did in Quantum Wellness is I went back to human design and I broke the chart down into layers of a story and really lay out a systematic template to assist everybody looking with your chart in the main parts of your story and how to actively take back control and influence over how you put those pieces of your chart together in your big story and how you can consciously choose by looking through all those pieces of your chart, how to bring out in the story the highest potential of each of those parts. So that ultimately you're weaving together this entire template of your own personal narrative that moves you out of that conditioning, pain, limiting story. We tend to limit our story or stop our story at the end of a tragedy. It's really a way of giving you the capacity through storytelling to create your own redemption arc for whatever might be happening in your life right now.
Amazing. I love that. I wish we had more time to talk about quantum living, but you have links for us to find this book so we can download it, we can listen to it, we can get a Kindle version. How can we get this book?
You should hopefully be able to get the book in paperback on any major book outlet. Certainly right now it's available on Amazon in paperback. The ebook version and the audiobook version is also available. So any major book retail establishment is going to carry the book.
Amazing. Thank you, Karen, so much for being a part of the SoulPrism podcast. I hope to have you back soon. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you, everyone, for listening. And we'll see you again soon. Bye.
Awesome. Bye.